Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us for the 33rd annual The Hartford Virtual Ski Spectacular. Today's session is Psychological Wellness on the Slopes, Culturally Inclusive Work with Veteran Athletes through a Whole Health Healing Model. My name is Krista Rapocchio, and I am the Senior Education Manager here at Move United, formerly Disabled Sports USA and Adaptive Sports USA. We would like to thank the Hartford for their longstanding commitment and support, as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs for allowing us to bring you this virtual opportunity, which we're really excited about. And it's officially the first session, so welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. All attendees will be on mute to minimize distractions, and this is a webinar, so we will not see your videos throughout the session. Because this is a webinar, therefore you will only see the videos of the speakers. And we're going to use some features here to keep things organized and to get as many questions as we can. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions rather than the chat so that they don't get lost. Closed captioning for this session is enabled, and attendees are welcome to adjust the font size as needed. Make sure to send your chat messages to all panelists and attendees to introduce yourself to the whole group, and you just want to check that little tab on the bottom to make sure it's going to all panelists and attendees and not just all panelists. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to one of our speakers, Sarah Brindle, who will start us off and introduce herself and get us started on our first session. Thanks, Sarah.
Wonderful. So I'm really happy to be here with you guys today, starting off this this interesting event, that's in a different format. And it's actually funny because I do not know how to ski. And I live in Southern California where it's, pretty nice weather right now, sunny and warm. So I am a psychologist at the VA hospital in Long Beach, California. I work with in our spinal cord injury service and have worked with disabled veterans for the past 15 years, just had my 15th anniversary. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. Morning, Tony. About working with veterans and kind of working from this whole health healing perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can look more at this topic. All right. So it's a very long title that I have today, but it kind of includes all the things that I'm going to be touching on today. So I'm not going to repeat that. We had that title, but just really happy to be here and happy to be joined by Tony Drees, who will introduce himself when we get to his portion. But he is here to talk as a mentor and a Move United Warfighter Ambassador. So I'm going to talk for about the first 20 minutes. I'm going to start my timer here so we make sure to have time for Tony's portion. So just a brief overview in terms of what I'm going to talk about this morning. So I'm going to talk about veterans, kind of what we know about the veteran population, some statistics. I'm going to talk about the most common mental health and medical issues that we see in veterans. I'm going to talk about the Whole Health Initiative that has been rolled out and utilized within the VA system. And then talking more specifically about healing and collaboration approaches in terms of concepts that instructors can use and practical strategies. And then talking a little bit about cultural variables, things to be keeping in mind, and then turn things over to Tony for the veteran athlete's perspective. So let's dive in. So I really like using visuals. This kind of makes me choked up thinking about the wonderful, diverse population of veterans that I have the privilege to serve. So, woo! All right, from my living room right now, no less. So we have women, we have men, we have people of, you know, different racial, ethnic backgrounds. We have old people, young people, we have folks with disabilities, some of them very high profile, like Tammy Duckworth in the lower left. We have LGBT veterans, you know, and everything in between. So, you know, when we talk about the veteran population, it's incredibly diverse. So I think it's important to think about that. So what is a veteran? So, you know, in terms of kind of a definition, a veteran is an individual who either enlisted or was drafted into military service. The term veteran implies that they are no longer serving in the military. They've been discharged to a civilian life. So that's contrasted to an active duty person. There's a lot of variability in terms of the length of service that somebody may have been in the military and whether they were involved in combat or wartime. Some receive care through the VA. Approximately 50% of veterans get their health care at the VA. And then others choose private health care or are above the income threshold for receiving VA care. The other thing to keep in mind is that veterans can access the VA even if they were not injured during their service. So if somebody served, you know, had no health problems whatsoever, if they are below that income threshold, they can get all of their primary care at the VA. And then just some general statistics. So, you know, who are our veterans? What do they look like? So 10% of the veteran population is female. In terms of racial ethnic background, about 13% African American, 7% Hispanic, 4% other, but that minority percentage is growing over time. In terms of war era, or, you know, the time period in which a person served, about 1/3 of the current population served in the Vietnam War, 1/3 in the Gulf War era, and that's actually a really long span, so 1990 to the present. 23% other peacetime, and then of course our Korean and World War II veterans are a slowly dwindling, well, quickly dwindling population. Veterans between 25 and 34 and over 65 are more likely to use VA services, and a whopping 92% identify as Christian. So that doesn't say anything about, you know, how involved people are in practicing their faith, but that's kind of that general statistic. So moving to talk about mental health issues, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is the most prominent issue that we hear about in the veteran population. So just a little bit about that. PTSD is caused by being exposed to a traumatic event where the natural process of recovery is interrupted. So many people experience trauma in their lifetime, but not everyone develops PTSD. Symptoms can include nightmares or unwanted memories of the trauma, avoidance of situations that bring back memories, heightened reactions, anxiety, or depressed mood. And there's a long history of the development of that disorder, what we know about it. So it used to be called all these other terms: nostalgia, soldier's heart, shell shock, battle fatigue. But it wasn't until 1980 that it became an official diagnosis. And that was after advocacy from a few different groups, including Vietnam veterans, sexual trauma survivors, and Holocaust survivors. About 10% of the general population will be diagnosed with PTSD in their lifetime. But for veterans, the lifetime prevalence is up to 35%, with some people having pre-military trauma as well, especially female veterans who are more likely to have experienced childhood and military sexual trauma. And then to go along with PTSD, up to 50% also have depression. So that often goes hand in hand. And then other mental health issues that veterans deal with: substance abuse for certain, and also serious mental illness like schizophrenia. And then specifically thinking about suicide, that's also been in the news a lot. The rate of suicide for veterans is 1.5 times the rate for the civilian population. And for female veterans, it's even higher at 2.2 times that rate. So switching to medical and disability-related issues among veterans, veterans are more at risk for some kind of general medical issues, including high blood pressure, chronic back pain, diabetes, lung disease, arthritis. So kind of more at risk for those. But then traumatic injuries among veterans related to service are also kind of a known entity. So traumatic brain injury also in the news a lot. And we know that that can cause physical and mental health problems. Shrapnel and gunshot wounds, limb loss and amputation, sprains and strains, limited range of motion, especially in the ankles and knees. And that can be from, that strain from carrying heavy packs, that kind of thing. Tinnitus and hearing loss, and also chemical exposure. So switching to kind of talking about this whole health initiative, this whole health approach. So this is something that was rolled out in the VA, I want to say like even 6 or 7 years ago, it sort of started. And different VAs have a different, like some are doing a lot of whole health services, some are doing not so much. It's kind of depending on how each VA, works with that model. So the definition is that it's a patient-centered care that affirms the importance of the relationship and partnership between patients and their community of providers. This is kind of wordy, but this next part is the most important one, I think. The focus is on empowering the self-healing mechanisms within the whole person while co-creating a personalized, proactive, patient-driven experience. So, really looking at what are the strengths within that person. Each individual has these strengths, has capacity for self-healing on some level. And what are we doing to tap into that? Okay, so that's kind of what I want you to think about as we're thinking about some of these other concepts. So just a little bit more about how whole health works. It places each person at the center of his or own healthcare. It shifts the focus of care towards health and well-being rather than symptoms. It utilizes mindful awareness. We hear about mindfulness a lot to promote self-care and healing. It emphasizes the importance of relationships and partnerships, and incorporates a range of conventional and complementary approaches. So things like yoga, Tai Chi, acupuncture. All right. I won't spend too much time on this. There's no quiz afterwards about this, but this is a nice graphic that visually shows how this whole health model works. So at the center is the individual, and then there are these 8 components that sort of feed into healing. And I'm going to go through those one by one. So the first one is working the body. So, how are you moving your body on a regular basis? And a lot of us did the trek to Breck. I think I did like 12 miles walking. So, what are you doing daily to move your body? So we've got some people skiing up there. Surroundings. So what's your environment look like? What does it feel like to you? Is it messy? Do you have cats running around? I do right now because they're excited for some reason. Personal development. What are you doing to learn more in your life? How are you growing in your life? Maybe that's through work, maybe that's through volunteering. So that's the personal development component. Food and drink. What are you putting in your body? So we've got the colorful food, right? They talk about eating things that were recently alive. Okay, I like that concept. And then recharge. So what are you doing to get, restful sleep, relaxation, leisure, family, friends, and caregivers. So how are your relationships? How are you tending to those relationships? Are they supportive to you? And then these last two have some overlap. So spirit and soul, connecting to something larger than yourself. So that might be a formal religion, might be, something more broad in terms of spirituality. Power of the mind kind of looks at mind-body practices. So we've got some of my adaptive yoga students here who gave permission for their photo to be shown. So what are you doing to, look at that mind-body connection? So I'm going to shift now to talk about, how some of these whole health concepts could be utilized in working with your adaptive athletes. So I'm going to first talk about concepts, and then we'll talk about some practical strategies. So when we're talking about a healing-centered approach, not just within whole health, but kind of looking at what does a healing-centered approach look like, rather than something that's trauma-informed. So healing-centered asks the question, what's right with you, instead of what happened to you. Okay, so there's that shift in attention. This next phrase kind of encapsulates it. I am more than what happened to me. I'm not just my trauma. So you're a whole person, right? So the focus is on assets and strengths rather than deficits or symptoms. There's a focus on collaborative healing interaction. So again, like that partnership and collaboration. Each person has their role to play. It also can mean just having faith in your athlete's resilience. So not just trying to decrease unpleasant feelings, but focusing on that resilience aspect. And I think from what I understand, Tony's going to talk about that a little bit too. The idea of a disability affirmative approach is something that I use a lot in my work with disabled veterans. I would refer folks to Rhoda Olkin, who's a disabled psychologist who's written a lot about this approach. In this setting, I feel like it means avoiding using able-bodied norms and an able-bodied worldview, because when you layer that on top of the work that you're doing with disabled athletes, it doesn't work, right? So you need to look at things from more of a disabled worldview, and that creates a much more positive, rich experience for those folks. And I'll talk a little bit more about disability as a cultural variable. And then, obviously thinking about the individual athlete at the center of their well-being, right? Instructors are there to assist athletes in tapping into their own self-healing mechanisms. So again, like not putting them in this other mold, but looking at them as an individual. What are their individual goals and assets? Okay, so what would that look like in terms of practical strategies? So I had asked when I was planning this talk about the intake forms that are used to work with athletes in terms of like what's included with that. And it sounds like from what I understand, most of it is with regard to medical issues. So, I wondered, is there a section for people to list, mental health diagnoses, anything they feel would be important? And it may be different depending on what you're doing with folks. But I think absolutely it can be appropriate to ask folks about individual considerations, anything that you might need to know about them that's a little different. So the time to do this would definitely be a time when you're not feeling rushed. So if you're literally at the top of a hill and you're ready to ski down, is not the time to ask, so do you have PTSD? do I need to know about that? So, finding a time, after you meet that person, you've developed a little rapport, a time to kind of, in an unrushed way, ask if there's anything that you might need to know about that person. And then, of course, empowering the athlete to disclose as they choose, right? It's not something that they need to tell you, but something that, in that collaboration, the person might feel comfortable sharing. So what are some specific things to ask? So, if this is your first time, what are your concerns or expectations, right? Like, what are your hopes for today in our work together? Is there anything you'd like to know about me before working together today? So oftentimes when I'm first meeting with a veteran to do therapy, it's important for them to know a little bit about me, and that helps develop that rapport. You could also ask, thinking about your previous experiences with adaptive sports, what things have come up that might be important for me to know? So that's kind of like a general way to open that door, let them know that you are interested to know how you can make that experience better for them. And then things to say. I'm here to be your partner today and to share my expertise. Also letting them know that sometimes unexpected things come up and we can stop at any time. Like that's cool. And then, if something does come up, normalizing that and saying, you know what, we're going to figure this out together. So again, kind of that partnership. Okay, more strategies. Be curious, you know, kind of have an open mind, open stance in terms of how that interaction is going to look, you know, and you might learn something really valuable from that person and working with them. Encouraging athletes to take a moment and discern what they need. So if it seems like maybe they're having a moment, just say, you know what, we can take our time. Let me know, you know, when you're ready. And, you know, having that unrushed atmosphere can really help the person be more aware of what they need in that present moment. So encouraging that, that mindful awareness. You could even say, you know, what are you noticing in your body right now? That might be a way to kind of tap into that. Let's take a breath and go inward for a moment. And a lot of these things are from my yoga brain, because I'm an adaptive yoga instructor as well. So you're getting that piece as well. Also reminding yourself that you're not there to fix or counsel the person, right? So kind of knowing your role, knowing the limitations of that role. And then letting go of your agenda. Like sometimes it's okay to go off script and say, you know what, we're gonna let's do something different today. You know, let's see what works. And then obviously get help if needed. If you're feeling like you're doing all these things and nothing's really working, you know, enlist the help of a colleague. Okay, looking at my time, I think we're good. So, you know, if somebody really is having a moment, it has been triggered in some way, is really expressing a lot of anxiety, it may be helpful to have under your belt, you know, some grounding techniques or things that you could do to help that person relax and kind of center themselves. We don't have time to go through this breathing exercise. If we had like an hour and a half, I would make you guys relax right now. But this top exercise here is just, you know, something to kind of relax just the head, right? So thinking about relaxing the top, the forehead, eyelids, right? Kind of moving down, and then just taking some deep breaths. The next technique with the numbers here, you don't have to make it complicated. So this could even be one of each of these things. So if you have an athlete who's really struggling, say, you know, let's take a breath for a minute. Tell me one thing you can see right now. Great. Tell me one thing you can feel. Well, I feel my cold fingers. All right. Tell me one thing you can hear. And so that really kind of brings that focus back to the moment. Body awareness can also be really helpful in grounding. So like right now, if I wanted to ground myself, okay, I'm going to, you know, notice the chair that I'm sitting on. I'm going to feel the sides of the chair. I feel where it's resting on my back. Okay. You can also have people bring their palms together and kind of do a little motion back and forth. What does that feel like for you, right? Shoulder shrugs. I love this one because if you're feeling stressed, you might not notice you're feeling tension in your shoulders. So take a breath in and right. It almost is like this immediate reset button. Okay. So you could do that for a few breaths. Also, a hand on the forehead is a great grounding technique. And if you're out in the cold and the person's hand is really cold, and you know, might not be the best time to do that, but it might be. It might kind of like bring them back to, oh yeah, okay. And then just simply bringing attention to the breath for several breaths. Noticing that sensation. Notice how the breath feels going in your nose. Maybe it's kind of cool, right? And just bringing that person back. Okay. So practice those today. See how you like them. And then lastly, thinking about more, you know, in terms of the cultural consideration piece. So all of my work is with the disability community. In my, you know, work as a VA psychologist and as a volunteer with a couple of local organizations. So I'm really aware that disability, you know, is a cultural variable. It's part of people's identity. So, you know, what does that mean to have it be a cultural variable? So one thing is thinking about sort of the shared language that people have you know, people use similar language to talk about their bodies, to talk about the disability experience. People also share experiences of discrimination and exclusion as folks with disabilities. And they also share, kind of in contrast with that, the experience of adaptation and creativity in their daily lives. So those are things that tend to be shared with people in that group. Disability is defined by the ADA as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. So that's kind of like this legal definition. But we actually have this statistic of 15% of the world population are people with disabilities. So it's actually the largest minority group in the world, which is surprising to a lot of people. So in terms of disability identity, some people will strongly identify with that as a primary identity and, you know, fully sort of embrace that and embrace the disability community. Some people not at all, you know, and that's not any part of the language that they're using. So I think it's just really good to be aware of that experience and sort of pay attention to how your athletes are talking about themselves and their bodies. So you don't need to change what you do, but having that awareness can be really important. Obviously, veteran culture, you know, having a veteran's identity is also very important for some people, not as much for others. Racial ethnic minority status, certainly important. And then we know that approximately 1 million veterans identify as LGBT. And I think the VA has done better, you know, in recent years in terms of providing culturally competent care. And I know, you know, in filling out my registration for this event, actually, I was really impressed with the things that I was asked, you know, by Move United. And I can see that and as an organization, there is a focus on diversity, which is really wonderful to see. So Tony's going to talk a little bit more about inclusion, but, you know, all these things can be a part of your athlete's identity. And then lastly, before I turn things over, just some resources. National Center for PTSD has great information. Veterans Crisis Line, also important to know. And then the American Psychological Association website has a lot of information for individuals and family members or people in a person's support network. And then the Whole Health website also has some really great like relaxation materials and just all kinds of information. So, all right, I'm going to turn things over to Tony and I'm going to stop sharing here. And all right, we're back. So Tony, take it away. And if you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Good morning, Dr. Sarah. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Drees. I saw by the who's here list, a few of you, I know a few of you. I'll let you know that on my side of the presentation, I want you to pay attention to more of how you feel. Dr. Sarah is very good at giving us very specific things to write down and visuals and references that we can go back to. Mine's a little bit different. I just want you to think and listen and think about how you feel. I'm going to keep it short in that I want you to focus on 3 things. And they're just my rules of life. They're simply no lies, no excuses, and never quit. And so I'm going to introduce myself, as Sarah said. My name is Tony Drees. I'm a veteran of the Gulf War. I was in a building that got struck with a Scud missile. Many of the people that were in my building passed away, and then a lot of us were injured. At the time, I was so injured that they wanted to cut my leg off at the hip. I was 23 years old. I said, nope. So after a lot of surgery, like 58 surgeries and 9 months in the hospital, I was able to jog out of the hospital and go on and continue my life. Right? Like, so for the next 27 years, many people didn't even know that, aside from seeing my hat or the license plates on my car, they didn't know necessarily that I was a combat injured veteran. In my late 40s, I began getting ill, right? So I went from being this big, strong, healthy guy to all of a sudden I was weak, I was tired, I was sick. And it really gave me an opportunity as the time was coming, right? Like I knew the time was coming. Tick tock. I had 27 years. And as the time was coming, it was a great opportunity for me to change perspective. It was a great opportunity for me to stop and remember the things that had made me get this far in life. How did I get to be 47? So I'm going to share a couple stories about my life, and then I'm going to bring it back around to athletes. The first rule that I have is no lies. I didn't learn this by accident. I learned this on a very, very trying hard time. The day I was 12 and a half years old, I was standing in the back of the courtroom, and I heard my parents say to the judge and say to a bunch of strangers that they didn't want me, that they never wanted me, and that they could take me. From that day, I remember I walked out of the door, and the hot tears were like burning down my face. And I remember standing there wanting desperately for my pain to end. It was at that time that my now adoptive mom spun me around and said, hey, I know what happened to you. I heard what they said about you, and I know what they've been doing to you. She said, I got to tell you something. The first thing she said is, Tony, life is not fair. She goes, for that, I'm so sorry. But I got good news for you. At this point, I was pretty ready for it. I'm like, okay, give it to me. She said, Tony, life is not fair. So whether you are or are not those things, it's totally up to you from now on. No one else can't even say anything about it. And that changed my life because it changed my perspective. So I also need you to know at that same time, everything in my life became challenged. The clothes I wear, the food I like, the people that I hung around with, the way that I talk, the way that we dress, how we sleep, our traditions, everything instantly changes. So too when you have a disability. So the truth of that is it's not fair. And it's not fair. And that's what we get to do as adaptive instructors, as adaptive mentors, as adaptive ambassadors. We get to show them that life is not fair, but we get to say what the truth is. The next rule, no excuses. Oh boy. There have been so many times in my life, I promise you, I've wanted to quit. I have wanted to quit because of pain, because of dark place, because of discrimination, because of being ignored, because of not having anyone feel like they're in my corner. And I think back to when I was a young man again. I learned this. I'm so glad for the lessons I learned when I was young, because at various stages of your life, they come back through again. And you get to do your 2.0 version of them. But my no excuses story was simply, my adoptive dad ran a farm. And they had a big farm, right? Like they were big. It was like an industrial farm. And so the guy is always busy. But then I noticed everybody came to my dad. Everybody. Like the neighbor. Like if someone had their car in the ditch, if someone needed anything that you can think of, they came to my dad. On top of it, I was the oldest of 7 kids. When he passed away a few years ago, each one of us acted like we were his only child. They're like, Dad was here for this, Dad was here for that, Dad was here for that. Now, being very observant, I noticed this about him. And I said something. I was like, hey, Dad, what's up with that? He said, what? I said, everybody comes to you. He said, huh? What's up with that? Now I really got to know. He goes, Tony, you have to cheat a little bit in life. All right, okay, you got my attention. He goes, start with something that you really, really like. He said, get so good at it that no one's better than you at it. By the time you do that 3 or 4 times, then you can really help people. He said, don't let anything stop you from doing the thing that you love the most, no matter what. I was 13. A little while ago, when I was 50 and they cut my leg off, I had the opportunity to relive that. I like being a beast. I like doing stuff that people say you can't do. And coming up on my 50th birthday, I would soon have the opportunity to do a lot of those things. And so rather than looking at it as this huge operation and this awful change in my life, and now I got to get my leg cut off, and what am I going to do? I was afforded the opportunity to look forward to it. I trained for it. I hopped around on one leg when people were looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? I used to go in the forest and hop up and down fallen logs. And so the reason I tell you this is not because of my no excuses. I want us as instructors to remember that the military cohort that we serve, a lot of us are wired like that. That's how the Army teaches us. That's how the Marines teach it. We do things that we didn't even know we could do. And especially if we're supported, especially if we're challenged, especially if we feel engaged. And the other thing, the final one, is never quit. Now I can mic drop you with my 74 surgeries, right? Mic drop. No. The never quit part has to do with the DEI portion that I want to talk about. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I just want you to imagine, if you can, that you're minding your own business, all of a sudden, some person on one ski jumps over you, does a couple turns, and then disappears. I don't care who you are. You're like, whoo, that is, whoo, who is that, right? That is diverse. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you're from. You're like, wow, that is inspiring. Diversity is inspiring to all people. The fact that, so now imagine if you're down at the bottom of the hill and you're sitting outside at the little cafe having your lunch, and then that one-legged skier skis up and throws a little hockey stop, takes off their helmet, and what do you see? Not only is the person one-legged, but if it's me, I'm brown, I've got gray hair, so I'm over a certain age, hopefully over 50, and I'm a veteran because instantly I put on my cap. So in your mind, as you do inventory, I don't know who you are, but most likely you didn't expect to see that person come out of the helmet. And so that's the inclusive part. The fact that I am brown, the fact that I am one-legged, disabled, as Sarah says, I don't even say the word, but disabled as Sarah's definition, over the age of 50, and a warrior. And the equitable part is that I was invited, and that someone gave me lessons, and someone gave me the opportunity, and someone showed me how to get to that. I'm getting choked up myself, but someone gave me the ability to have that proficiency level. That's what we get to do as instructors, mentors, ambassadors. This is what we get to do. And there's people out there like Jess and Carol at NSCD and Jess at the VA. You guys know it is not a one and done. And that's what I want us to know as instructors. We have an opportunity to take our entire lives' experiences and be open to their perspective and see how we can merge our experiences to an everlasting lifestyle for these athletes. I don't want to be part of something that's just one and done. Yeah, we took some guys skiing and now they're back home suffering. I want to be part of the solution, that we got to expose people to our mountain and they got a piece of our healing and they took it back to their cohort and they're spreading the joy. And so in order to do that, I simply have 3 rules. No lies, no excuses, and never quit. My name is Tony Drees. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony, and hello, Tony. And thank you to Tony and Sarah so much for sharing your approaches and your stories with all of us here today. I know I greatly enjoy just listening to the information provided, and I know a bunch of our attendees feel the same way as well. We've had a few questions come through that I'd love to pose to the 2 of you. And if you are an attendee right now and you haven't had a chance to send us your questions, once again, there's that Q&A right at the bottom of your screen, and you could type them in. As I see them come up, I will pose them to Tony or Sarah or both, whoever they're intended for. So to start, Sarah, moving towards a whole health approach, it may seem appealing to many providers and others that are hearing this information for the first time, and excited about this. And there's a lot you can do. So where would you recommend someone start if it's like their first go at, using whole health or implementing a whole health initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I would direct folks to the Whole Health website, because there are a lot of resources there, resources for providers as well as individuals, like for veterans. So there's just a ton of information. So it sort of depends on what somebody is looking for within that. But yeah, some of it's more theoretical and some of it's more practical, kind of like how I divided, what I talked about. But I think just that overall concept of, there are all these different things that feed into us to support our well-being. And, you as an instructor might only be, fulfilling one or two of those things. But you may end up encouraging somebody about, another one of those things, right, that you hear them talk about. And so, yeah.
Great. So I took away from that just like gathering your information, making a plan, and then executing on what you need, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And Tony, kind of a connection here, but as Sarah went through kind of the overview of whole health and this approach, do you see any overlap, or do you envision that there is overlap between a whole health approach and DEI? Like, is that something that might allow a little bit more of movement in the DEI space by adopting this whole health approach, in your opinion?
Krista, yes is the answer to whole health and DEI. I'll tell you, as part of my actual going through the final surgeries, I had to shift, right? So I was a big body only guy for a lot of my life. Like, I was a power lifter, I was bodybuilder, all that stuff, strong guy. And going through this process, was encouraged and allowed and afforded the opportunity to change. So I had to go within to the mind, body, spirit. So much so that even after I had my amputation, I was at the Center for the Intrepid in San Antonio, and they're all about it. Like, they have an enhanced physiological, psychological, and physiological performance, right? They, even in the military, are understanding that the mind, body, spirit is connected, and we have to treat them as such if you want to have overall healing.
Absolutely. Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I actually just remembered, I don't know why I didn't think of this, but so the whole health model does have some assessment measures that folks can use. And they basically, what you were talking about, Tony, kind of made me think about this, is, they have certain parts of those measures that really connect you to your core values, right? So if one of your values is being a beast, right, as you were saying, so that value is still relevant for you, even though your body has completely changed. So that's definitely part of that model, in terms of identifying what are the things that are important to you in your life, and how can you be making decisions on a daily basis that are in line with those values. And how can your healthcare team support you in that? How can your, adaptive sporting instructors support you with that? And how can you support that within yourself? So it sounds like you basically did that on your own, without the whole health model, but that concept helped you,
And it happens also on the ski slope, folks, if you don't mind either. Understanding what the goals of your student are more important. I can't tell you how many ski instructors I wore out. I would take them out in the morning and they have to give me a new one for lunch, right? I swear. But that was my goal. That's not everyone's goal. And so you have to make sure that you understand that there's not only physical goals and things that we're trying, core values, but there's also cultural ones, right? Like, my deal was I wanted to ski independently. Like, day one, when we were doing the first lesson, I wanted to be independent. Some people just, like, there's different there's different levels, and be sensitive to the levels for your student, but not sensitive to yourself. It's not about you. Like if they are like, I don't want to ski with you, good, get them someone else, right? Hurry up and get them someone else, because what they're saying is, this is what I need from the experience, and be sensitive to what they need. And most likely you'll get what you need while doing that.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think it goes to that collaboration, you know, because if as an athlete, you are able to say what your goals are, right? And as an instructor, being cool with changing your agenda to match, you know, what your athlete is interested in, that's a good collaboration, right? So again, being okay to go off script and say, oh, well, I had a certain idea about today, but sounds like you want something different. Let's make that happen, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's a core principle in many spaces, the idea of building relationships and truly getting to know the person, and not just surface level, but really every dimension and aspect of the person that they're willing to share with you. And then as time goes on, you build more and more into that relationship. So I can understand how that's a huge part of this work as well, as you described.
Mm-hmm.
Not to switch gears entirely, but we have another question that just came in from William. And Sarah, you had led us through a little bit of a grounding exercise or a grounding technique. And William was curious if you had any knowledge on how these grounding techniques can be adapted for blind or visually impaired persons, or any ideas that come to mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, I mean, the first one, the breathing exercise with the relaxation of the head, that would be perfectly, you know, accessible to anyone, because you're just, I mean, for most people, we encourage them to close their eyes for that exercise, and you're just kind of doing like that wave of relaxation over the face and down to the neck. For the other exercises, I think just being able to focus on you know, physical sensation, you know, that would be really accessible. And, you know, just thinking about how these things could be accessible in general to anyone. I think, yeah, for me, the focus on the face is really nice, because, you know, for most folks, you know, they have sensation in their face. They might not be able to, you know, see something in front of them, but, you know, like the hand on the forehead, that would be accessible. Yeah, I mean, almost any of those things, honestly. Yeah. And the breath, you know, that's, in fact, one of my favorite books that I found in my adaptive yoga work is called Yoga Mind. And it's about a woman yoga instructor who ends up working with one of her best friends who had a traumatic spinal cord injury and was basically paralyzed from the neck down, you know, couldn't feel or move anything from the neck down. And she ended up doing yoga with him, and not doing anything with his physical body, but doing the yoga breathing and meditation. And, you know, it was kind of transformative for him. So I think a lot of the adaptive yoga concepts are really great for any population, any body. So yeah, but great question. Yeah, and I'm definitely available as a resource if people have questions about some of those things. You know, email away. I'd be happy to consult.
Excellent. And just another question that just came through, and please feel free to speak to whatever information you have on this, but Julianne was wondering if the VA is moving towards dropping disorder from PTSD diagnosis. Is that something that you've kind of witnessed or experienced at this point?
Can you say that again? So
yeah, so the question is the VA moving towards dropping disorder from a PTSD diagnosis?
Not that I know of. You know, I don't work in the PTSD program. So there is a separate, at RVA anyway, there's a separate PTSD program. And, you know, some services are available to people who may not have a formal diagnosis of PTSD, but have PTSD symptoms. So we talk about the idea of like a sub-threshold PTSD. So, you know, there are still distressing symptoms. That person could still benefit from treatment geared towards, you know, a trauma-focused treatment, but may not meet that formal diagnosis. So we're still providing services to those people. But as far as I know, yeah, and within the, you know, kind of diagnostic manual that we use, you know, like for billing purposes and that type of thing, it's still considered a disorder. But I think, you know, in other settings, you know, it can be useful to talk about it in a different way, you know, because there, you know, I didn't really cover this, but of course there's so much stigma around mental health diagnoses and disability issues as well. So, you know, all of that is wrapped into it. And I think depending on your setting, you know, it's just important to be sensitive to that and try to make things as accessible to people so that people can get the help they need, you know. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that wasn't what you were looking for, Julianne, feel free to send a follow-up in the Q&A, but I think that was where we were going with it.
Yeah.
Tony, your kind of overarching story, and then, you know, this, what I took as a motto that comes out of it with no lies, no excuses, never quit. As time goes on and kind of you experience different things in life and in different stages of your life, how, you know, is it that you've always come back to, even if you maybe have felt that you've, you know, found yourself further away from that motto, how do you always kind of recenter yourself and bring yourself back to it?
That's an interesting question. Krista, the only thing that I can say is I've always had this incredible sense of belief. That's actually what I sell as a motivational speaker. Mm-hmm. I sell belief, nothing else. Your belief in you and my belief in me and our belief in each other and our belief in the ability that we can help each other. And so that's all I've ever had. I mentioned that I was adopted. Yeah, you don't just get taken out of your home and adopted by a family of a different race because it's Tuesday, right? There has to be some very traumatic, some very legal, some very, like, it has to be some tough stuff going on. And the only thing that I had to hold on to during those times is the belief that something better is out there for me. Then as I began to get older, then I could attach that belief. Fortunately, like I said to you, I was a very physical person. Well, it turned out that my physicalness was a survival mechanism, like physical, and then it turned into be my spiritual survival mechanism, right? So like, I know I'm tough, I know I'm strong, right? Like, and I got to rely on, right? No matter what, I at least had these things and no one could take that away from me. And so whatever any of us has as an individual, we need to take inventory. And that's where no lies really comes in for me. It's not the lies that other people tell you. That's the first of no lies. Not just no lies. I'm not going to tell you, where were you after work? Right? That's up to you. The lies that people say when they say you can't, or you are, or you always, or you never, those are lies. And I don't have to accept those. That's my first rule. And so then when I don't accept them, then it gives me a space to be able to be honest with myself and take inventory for what I really am. Mm-hmm. And my really am, then I dwell on those. And then how can I expand on those? Well, if I'm really strong, then can I branch out a little bit from this strength? And then all of a sudden you have this huge oak tree again. And then now you're like, well, I feel pretty well-rounded in a few areas.
Mm-hmm. And I think that gets back to that idea of like not using able-bodied norms or other people's ideas of how your life should look, or, you know, because they're not the ones living in your body. Right? And you get to decide and do that self-inventory for you as an individual and say, okay, what are my goals here? You know?
Yeah. And when I hear self-inventory and a comment just came through in the chat about, thank you for this really great information, and thanks for helping to heal our community. I also feel that is a little bit of the self-work you're doing as well. How can you heal yourself, and how can you really get to know yourself so that you can stay true to whether it's your core value or it's your life story. And I think that's a huge takeaway of something from today's session as well, on top of all the other amazing information we received. We have one more. Tony, you're definitely like you're getting all these shout outs in the chat, and you have somebody that left us a question about when you're going to get together to bike, golf, rock climb, and ski. So you have some people that you have to return some hangouts with there. But I just wanted to say we're coming up on time here, and I just wanted to really thank you once again, Tony and Sarah, so much for sharing your approaches and your stories. And to everyone watching and that's joined us, that ends our first session of the day, Psychological Wellness on the Slopes, Culturally Inclusive Work with Veteran Athletes Through a Whole Health Healing Model. I was saying before, I hope I didn't jumble that title, so success.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for providing us with extremely valuable insight and ways to implement a new way of providing care and building relationships with our veteran population. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us and asking some really great questions. We value your feedback, and if you have just a few moments, please take those couple seconds to complete the survey that will appear in the chat and the browser at this time when you exit the session. If it's not there already, it'll be there in a few seconds. If there is something that stood out to you today, please engage with us on social media as we kick off our Ski Spectacular virtual event. And you can stay engaged throughout the next couple days, share your favorite memories from Ski Spec, or thoughts or kind of current ideas that are popping up in your mind throughout this event and on social media by using the hashtag SkiSpec. So is there anything final, Tony or Sarah, that you'd like to say? We have about 2 minutes, and if not, we could let everybody get on to the next session.
I think just a reminder, you had put it in the chat, I think, but that this session is being recorded. So if people are interested in resources, they'll have access to that. So I know I put a bunch of websites up there, and nobody could write it down, but it'll be available.
Absolutely. And this session will be up on Move United's YouTube page within 24 to 48 hours. So if you miss something, it'll be there again for you to rewatch or find a clip of. But
the last thing I want to say before we leave is, look, how many of us get to change the world by skiing? How many of us get to change the world by doing exactly what we want to do, exactly what we love? That's the opportunity we're all presented. So enjoy it. Look at it as such, and every person that you touch, you get to share the love that you have with them, with one of your nation's heroes. So easy. Enjoy your life. Thank you so much.
Can't top that. Have a good one, everybody. Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Tony.